Hey YouTube, here going to talk about things going on in the world around us, and I'm here to talk about the verdict yesterday of Chauvin regarding the George Floyd thing and how that all unfolded, and the latest killing of a teenage girl in Ohio by an officer. So let's just jump right into the George Floyd case. Super polarizing. Activists on the left will pretty often say that it was cold-blooded murder. You know, why on earth would an officer stand on someone's neck for 9 minutes? And people on the far right would point out quite the opposite perspective of George Floyd being on fentanyl during the case, his criminal history, and all that. Regardless of whatever end of the political spectrum you're on, it's important to kind of recognize that this was a very complicated case with a lot of grayness to it. And if you want to be really, truly objective to this whole thing, you should watch the entire arrest, not just the last 9 minutes of George Floyd's life, but the entire arrest from when police officers arrived to when they found George Floyd to how they dealt with George Floyd and how George Floyd was behaving throughout the whole time. I'm not going to say he wasn't a victim of excessive force, and I'm not going to say that he wasn't a saint either. But I am just going to say that the case was a very complex issue. And to discuss the case, I will proceed that with pointing out that one of my earliest childhood memories was the O.J. Simpson case. O.J. Simpson, very high-profile person, starred in movies, was an athlete and everything, and after being found innocent on his case, actually went on to write a book of how I would have done it if I had done it, if he actually murdered his wife. So it tells you a bit right there on what actually may have occurred. But what actually kept happening with the O.J. Simpson case was the jury had to keep getting cycled out because the media got too involved with the case. That's something you're supposed to do if the media influences a juror to any level as to how to make a decision, whether it's guilty or innocent. You have to cycle out that jury, otherwise it's not objective anymore. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to look at it, this did not happen with George Floyd. And this would brings me right to Maxine Waters. I just want to talk about Maxine Waters next to proceed. My whole point going there. Maxine Waters is a representative out in the state of California, and she oversees a city near Los Angeles called the city of Compton that has, under her watch, gone from an unsafe neighborhood to a neighborhood you should not be in at any time of day. And living conditions for people within this area have gotten worse and worse and worse, and Maxine Waters has not done crap for her district. She, throughout her entire tenure as representative of that area, has not only not been involved with helping her constituents, but also does not even live anywhere near that area. Lives miles and miles away in a nice mansion that you couldn't find anywhere near Compton. So, what does she do prior to the verdict? She gets on a nice private jet, flies to Minneapolis, gets a police escort to an anti-police rally, and then what does she do? Well, I'm just gonna present what she did because it's quite unbelievable.
Affecting the case, Representative making these comments about the trial.
I hope that we're going to get a verdict that is say guilty, guilty, guilty. And if we don't, we're we cannot go away. We've got to get more confrontational. We've got to make sure that they know that we mean business.
The judge denied a request for a mistrial.
Okay. So, Maxine Waters, she got her wish. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The judge denied request for mistrial. So, for 9 months, we've had riots in the streets. We've had the president, the vice president, the secretary of state, the Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House. That's what I meant to say. Commenting on this case. Maxine Waters, though, the best example. If we don't get guilty, 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 there needs to be more violence in the streets. And couple things to pull from it. I'm sharing our Instagram Project G.A.S. Instagram, by the way, in this. But this post sums it up pretty nicely. I love this Drake meme, by the way. It's pretty handy dandy. But Maxine Waters once again saying, quote, "Protesters should not let up. Be more confrontational. Take to the streets and confront and intimidate them wherever you find them." So this was something she actually said a long time ago. Actually didn't realize that until I was reading it, and I was like, oh man. So she said this, influencing people to go get Trump supporters. Wow. That's something. That's not inciting violence. But when Donald Trump said, "Walk down to the Capitol and peacefully and patriotically let your voices be heard," that was an impeachable offense. So Maxine Waters, with her, again, flying private jet all over to Minneapolis, getting a private police escort to a protest, walks up in front of the cameras and says, if we don't get guilty, 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 we didn't make it more violent. Well, after she said this, there was a drive-by shooting of a National Guard soldier who was shot in Minneapolis because of potentially Maxine Waters saying we need to make it more violent because we need our voices to be heard. Yeah, you know whose voices aren't being heard right now, Maxine Waters? Your constituency. The people of Compton. The people of Compton have had terrible living conditions, and you, Maxine Waters, who's been in Congress now for 40 years, hasn't done crap to help them. Yet when you have this huge, visibly apparent thing all over media for 9 months, yeah, that'll help you get some votes from your constituency. Going there and pretending you care about George Floyd. But the Republicans, a couple of Republican representatives presented something to the House to try and get her to lose her seats. Somewhat similar to a veto of the president, but 100% of the Democratic Party denied that. And if they didn't have a majority of the House, that would have meant something. But that wouldn't have meant anything. But now that they do have a majority of the House, that they can shut down anything, and that sort of behavior of causing more violence, causing a National Guard soldier potentially to be shot. Yeah, that's really important for people to just let happen. Apparently, the Democrats believe. So Chauvin trial. Do I think it should have been guilty of second and third degree murder, guilty of manslaughter? As I mentioned earlier, the whole entire thing is available. I think, bare minimum, the officer involved sitting on his neck for 9 minutes could have potentially been charged with manslaughter because, I don't know, he could have done something different. But second and third degree murder implies that there is some sort of intent in killing Floyd. And that's just my opinion. But I think what's starting to happen within the United States is people are taking politicians and taking celebrities' words and just going with it. It's like, yeah, that, whatever they said, they said it. They're a representative of a state. They're a celebrity. If they believe it, I must, it makes sense for me to believe it. Instead of people objectively going and watching. And this trend, I think, is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. In fact, it did not take long that there was a shooting of a woman, a girl, a 16-year-old teenage girl in Ohio that occurred the day of the Chauvin trial. And what happened was there was a domestic disturbance. Friends and family out in front of this house, spilling out into the street. So an officer responds to the scene, and what happens is a 16-year-old girl who looks like an adult, so we don't know if she's a girl or an adult, is gotten a hold of another woman and has a knife and is doing stabbing actions at this other woman she has a hold of. The officer, who has literally just been thrust in the situation with people surrounding him, is seeing someone about to get stabbed, potentially to death. So the officer takes out his weapon and fires on that person. Well, of course, since this is hot on the heels of the George Floyd death, we have celebrities everywhere who are responding to this. Here we go. LeBron James, who is hugely influential in Ohio because he, for the majority of his NBA career, was playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers, which are, Ohio's only major league sports team. Is that right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But here we go. LeBron James now deleted tweet targets officer in Ohio police shooting. You're next, with a symbol of an hourglass. Hashtag accountability. And I found this in Fox News, local Fox though, not the cable network. So of course, good on the news for blurring his face, because LeBron James didn't go to that extent of blurring the face of the officer. So what happened after LeBron James tweeted this? Well, more riots occurred. And more damage has been done to property everywhere. And is that LeBron James' fault? Potentially. LeBron James inciting violence against an Ohio police officer. This is disgraceful and dangerous. Is the NBA okay with this? Is Twitter okay with this? I don't know. On behalf of pro athletes, current and former, I apologize for how LeBron James just showed his inner Maxine Waters and made a very real, ongoing threat to the life of a police officer who quickly acted to prevent a knife attack from becoming worse. Many of us appreciate what, I don't know what LEOs are. Someone tell me in the comment section. Clay Travis. LeBron James doxes police officer who saved a teenage girl from being stabbed to death. Demands officer be held accountable. Sets new record for athlete stupidity. Yeah. Purported threatening violence. Oh yeah, this is a good point. AG Hamilton 29 brings up, at cop did nothing wrong by any reasonable standard, and now someone with 50 million followers is encouraging attacks against him. That's on top of countless news organizations lying about his actions. Decent people need to speak out. Real people will get hurt by this stuff. And this LeBron James defending himself. Oh well, we don't care about what LeBron James thinks, because we already know what he thinks. He thinks what people like Maxine Waters want you to think is that there is systematic racism that is in every police department across the United States, and that every police department across the United States needs to be defunded, because that'll go great, right? Like in the city of Seattle, where their police department is defunded, and within a few months of doing that, there are now homeless encampments on school campuses. And when the defunded police departments are asked, could you please sweep these schools from to help protect our kids from homeless people who are living on these campuses, police officer says, sorry, we don't have the manpower to do so. Do it yourself. That's just what is obviously reform is something we can all talk about, but defunding is an entirely different thing. LeBron James, also just to point out, is kowtowing to who pays a lot of his bills, and that would be China. China is one of the biggest funders of the NBA, and a lot of that money does go to the athletes. No NBA player has ever spoken out against the Uyghur genocides, or the genocide of any other type of people happening right now in China under Xi Jinping. They want to continue to keep the focus on the United States, and that's fine, but to have such a snap judgment on such a clearly stressful situation, which involved a near stabbing to death, and to dox a police officer, is not only irresponsible, but, in my opinion, should be a bannable offense on Twitter, because you are threatening the life of someone. It is in the Twitter's rules that you can't dox people. In fact, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas just got banned from Twitter for him leaking his footage of people working at CNN and their unsound practices, which proves their bias. James O'Keefe can't do anything on Twitter anymore. LeBron James can tweet away, and he can continue to continue to influence his 50 million followers, continue to help incite riots in the city of I actually don't know where it occurred, but in the state of Ohio, we'll just say. And just like the George Floyd case, you can go online and watch even on YouTube, it's still on YouTube, what transpired. And if you just continue to ask that question, if you were a police officer put in that situation, what would you have done? One of the pervasive things that is being stated by people generally on the left opposed to what the officer did is like, how could he have killed a child? Well, if you watch that footage, does that look like a child to you? So, I really hope that this trend of celebrities and politicians making quick decisions on things, or continuing to posture for their voting basis, slows down. And social media has a responsibility to help police these things, and they're not doing so. Lastly, I just want to say, the government, as well as people like Al Sharpton, is filled with race hustlers. In fact, Malcolm X, a lot of people on the right tend to cite Martin Luther King Jr. as the primary driver of the civil rights movement, which is true, but also in the driver's seat, I think needs to be recognized as Malcolm X. Malcolm X is someone who isn't talked about enough because he obviously, his tactics were more aggressive than Martin Luther King Jr.'s, but he had an invaluable part of that movement. And I think what needs to be said about Malcolm X, which isn't said enough, is he said the greatest enemy to the black man is the white liberal. Because the white liberal will say nice things to you. The white liberal's like a fox, where they'll say nice things to you, but when you turn away and turn your back to them, they'll stab you in the back. He said that. Things are no different nowadays. In fact, this reminds me, I'm surprised I didn't think of this until now, so I apologize, I don't have the video lined up. But Biden, Pelosi, and Harris have all had speeches about the verdict of the trial. Pelosi says, thank you to George Floyd for dying. She didn't use the word martyr, but for sacrificing your life for justice. Really? Yeah? Very insensitive. But I just want to point out, both Biden and Harris basically said that the verdict is right and more work needs to happen. Really. Joe Biden, the guy who made the 94 crime bill that put more black people in jail than anything else that's ever existed in the modern history of legislation. Kamala Harris, the former DA of San Francisco who used to hide evidence to keep people from minor drug offenses for being locked up, as well as people on death row from having their lives be saved, in order to keep her record perfect. Those two people are saying that, yeah, there are police officers out there who need to be arrested for stuff, but Biden especially literally helped make a system which really tortured people, destroyed families, destroyed black families. That's worse than Biden, especially with the 94 crime bill. That's worse than anything Chauvin has ever, well, other than, Biden never sat on someone's head, which led to the death of anyone, at least as far as we know. But Biden ruined millions of lives of black families. The 94 crime bill added mandatory minimums, where if you get arrested a third time for having pot in a state that doesn't allow pot, you go away to jail for at least 10 years. Biden did that. You think people with felonies on the record can easily get jobs? No, their lives are ruined for the rest of their lives, and because they've been in jail for 10 years, potentially, they can't be with their kids, and, their wives move on if they or remain single mothers and have to get two jobs. And now you have a child without a dad in the home and without a mother who has the free time to spend time with them. That's ruining the black community. People like Maxine Waters who don't care about their district at all. People like Nancy Pelosi doing the same for San Francisco. People like Joe Biden, who wrote the 94 crime bill, who became president and then pretended like that never happened. People like Kamala Harris, who put her career before her people. And I say her people loosely because Kamala Harris like her family's history is a history of slave owners. She's from Jamaica. Her father's side of the family had like plantations and everything, so yeah. This is the current administration we're currently in. One that has said for 4 straight years, at least those currently in administration who were in power before, 4 straight years that Donald Trump was a fascist, who was racist, you know, and Republicans are all racist. And now look at the border. They're not even going to the border, laughing about it. When it comes to Chauvin, Maxine Waters openly incites riots, which led to the death of a National Guard soldier. And we're supposed to rah rah rah, yeah, go you guys. And LeBron James can dox a police officer, and a social media platform doesn't do shit about it. It's the world we're living in nowadays, everyone. Hope you're all doing good. I'll catch you guys on the next one.